This is Daniel's story, and it begins on Thanksgiving Day, a day that should have been filled with warmth, family, and gratitude. Instead, it became the moment when his family revealed their darkest truth. But what they didn't know was that Daniel had been preparing for this day all along. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon pie, the clinking of silverware, the chatter of relatives catching up, the sound of football on the TV in the background. It was the picture-perfect Thanksgiving scene. At least, on the surface. Daniel sat quietly at the end of the long dining table, his hands folded in his lap. He wasn't here for the food or the conversation. He was here because he already knew this would be the last time. For weeks, he had sensed something brewing. Whispered phone calls he wasn't included in. Text messages that stopped when he walked into the room. And above all, that subtle but unmistakable coldness from his family. The kind that tells you you've been pushed to the outside, even when you're still in the room. He watched his sister, Natalie, carving the turkey as though she were the queen of the evening. She glanced at him once, a flicker of something sharp in her eyes. Almost smug, almost cruel. Joel, his brother, was already on his third beer, cracking jokes too loud, trying to fill the space with anything but honesty. His parents, sitting across from each other, shared a private nod, a signal, a silent agreement. Daniel knew exactly what was coming. Dinner began. Plates passed from hand to hand, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce. Everyone made small talk, laughter bouncing off the walls, but it wasn't laughter that reached Daniel. To him, it felt hollow, forced. He tried to eat, but every bite tasted bitter. He'd been preparing for this for months. He could almost hear the folder sitting in his bag in the hallway closet, its weight heavier than the turkey on the table. Inside it lay years of receipts, transfers, documents, his truth. The truth his family had ignored, twisted and used against him. And tonight, when they made their move, he would be ready. It was halfway through the meal when Natalie cleared her throat. She set her fork down delicately, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and looked around the table as if she were about to give a toast. Instead, she gave a verdict. "Well," she began, her voice dripping with sweetness that didn't match the coldness in her eyes, "I guess it's time we tell Daniel." The room fell silent. Forks stopped clinking. Joel's smirk faded. Even the TV in the living room felt quieter, as if the entire world leaned in to listen. Daniel didn't move. He just watched her, waiting. Natalie smiled. "We talked, all of us. And, well, we've decided. Daniel, you're out." The family voted. "You're not part of this anymore." Her words landed like glass shattering across the table. Daniel's father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "It's for the best, son. You've changed. You're different from us." His mother wouldn't meet his eyes, just stared at her plate. "We agreed. It's time you learned to stand on your own." Joel chuckled nervously, trying to mask his discomfort. "Yeah, bro. Don't take it too hard. We just think you don't really fit in anymore." The weight of it settled on the table like a storm cloud. Every word, every silence was a blade. And yet, Daniel felt strangely calm, because he had been expecting this, because they thought they were betraying him. But the truth? They had only walked into his plan. Daniel set down his fork, wiped his hands slowly on his napkin, and looked around the table one by one. Natalie, with her smug grin, Joel, with his uneasy smirk, his father, stoic and firm, his mother avoiding his gaze. They thought they had cornered him, that he would beg, that he would plead for their acceptance, for their love, for their approval. But Daniel didn't feel fear. He didn't feel desperation. He felt something else entirely. Relief. Because now, finally, it was time. And this is where the story truly begins. Because Daniel had come prepared with the truth. A truth that would shatter the very foundation of this family and expose everything they had tried to hide. The folder waited in the hallway closet, and once it was opened, nothing would ever be the same again. The dining room sat in stillness. The kind of stillness that follows a lightning strike when everyone waits for the thunder. Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Natalie. Her smirk widened, as though she'd just delivered the winning blow in a game he didn't know he was playing. "You all voted me out?" Daniel said softly, his tone even, almost curious. Joel gave a half shrug. "It's not personal, man, just, it's better this way." His father's voice followed, sharp as a knife. "You've always been different, Daniel. You don't belong in this family dynamic anymore. You've pulled away, and now we're doing the same." Daniel's mother shifted uncomfortably, her hand trembling as she set down her wine glass. "It's for the best," she whispered. Daniel inhaled slowly. Then he exhaled. They thought they were in control, but they had no idea what was coming. Without a word, Daniel pushed back his chair. The wooden legs scraped against the floor, the sound harsh and sudden in the suffocating quiet. Everyone watched him stand, expecting him to storm out, maybe even beg. But Daniel didn't leave. He walked calmly to the hallway closet, opened the door, and pulled out a thick, worn leather folder. He set it down on the dining table with a heavy thud. The weight of it made the wine glasses tremble. "What's that supposed to be?" Natalie sneered. Daniel's calm voice cut through the room. "This," he said, resting his hand on the folder, "is the past 10 years of my life. The part of my life you've all taken and pretended to forget." Daniel opened the folder slowly, methodically, like a teacher revealing a lesson no one wanted to learn. The first document, a receipt for $15,000, wired to cover Joel's rehab. "Remember this?" Daniel asked, sliding it across the table toward his brother. "The time you overdosed and I dropped everything to get you into a program? You promised you'd pay me back. You didn't, and you promised you'd change. Did you?" Joel's smirk faltered. His hand twitched toward the paper, but he didn't touch it. Next, Daniel pulled out another document. A transfer of $8,000. "For your teeth, Natalie, remember? Elective dental work, veneers. You said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You called me crying that you'd be embarrassed to smile at work without it." Natalie flushed crimson, her jaw tightening. "That's not—" Daniel cut her off. "Don't lie. I have every text, every message, every receipt." He pulled another stack, $20,000 for Dad's surgery. Insurance wouldn't cover it. "You begged me to step in, and I did. I didn't hesitate." His father's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Another stack, $12,000 to pay off Mom's credit card debt. "You told me you were drowning, that collectors were harassing you, that you'd lose the house." "I wrote the check." His mother's eyes welled with tears. She still couldn't look at him. And then, the thickest stack yet. $30,000. "For what you all called a family emergency. Do you remember what that was?" The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's voice hardened. "It was a trip. To Cabo, a vacation. While I was working 60-hour weeks to make ends meet." He slammed the folder shut. The sound cracked like a gavel in a courtroom. But Daniel wasn't done. He slid his phone out of his pocket and placed it next to the folder. "One more thing," he said quietly, "in case you've all forgotten what you say about me behind my back." He swiped the screen. One by one, he laid out printed screenshots. Natalie's texts. "Don't worry, Daniel will cover it. He's basically our cash cow." Joel's messages. "Yeah, just guilt trip him. He'll fold like always." Even his mother's words. "Daniel's too soft. He'll never say no." Each page landed on the table like a hammer. The air grew heavy with shame. "You called me your cash cow," Daniel said, his voice low, trembling with controlled fury. "Not your brother, not your son, just your wallet." The family exploded. Joel shoved his chair back, face red. "This is out of context. You don't understand." Daniel snapped his gaze toward him. "I don't understand? Joel, I paid for your rehab. Twice. And while I was covering for you, do you know what Natalie was doing with my money?" Joel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Daniel pulled out one last receipt. "A hotel booking. 2 nights. paid with funds Natalie claimed were for bills. He looked at Joel, then at Natalie. Does the name Alyssa ring a bell? The color drained from Joel's face. Natalie shot up from her chair, her voice shrill. That's none of your business! It became my business the second you used me to cover your lies, Daniel said, his voice like steel. The room erupted, Joel shouting at Natalie, Natalie screaming back, their parents trying desperately to hush them, to salvage what little dignity remained. But it was too late. The truth was out. Scene 11, Daniel's final words. Daniel stood in the chaos, calm and unmoving. He looked at them one last time, the family that had bled him dry, mocked him, discarded him. You voted me out? He said softly. No, I'm the one leaving. And this time, it's for good. He slipped the folder back under his arm, slid his phone into his pocket, and pushed his chair neatly under the table. Then he added, Oh, and before you think you can come crawling back, I've revoked everything. Power of attorney, emergency contacts, financial ties, all of it. You don't get to use me anymore. Natalie sputtered. You can't just walk away. We're family. Daniel turned to her, his eyes cold. No, you were family. You made your choice the moment you turned me into a paycheck. And with that, he walked out. The door shut behind him, sealing the chapter he'd waited years to end. What Daniel left behind was chaos. What he carried with him was freedom. But the story doesn't end there, because leaving is just the beginning. What happens when you finally cut ties with the people who raised you, yet nearly destroyed you? What does it mean to rebuild a life from the ashes of betrayal? That comes next. The door closed behind Daniel, but inside the house, the storm raged on. Joel slammed his fist against the table. You lied to me, Natalie? You used his money, my rehab money, to sneak off to a hotel with Alyssa? Natalie shot back, her voice sharp and venomous. Don't you dare turn this on me, Joel. You're a mess. You've always been a mess. At least I don't leech off Daniel pretending to get better. Their father barked, Enough. But even his voice no longer carried authority. For the first time, the cracks in their so-called unity were laid bare. Their mother tried to collect the papers, shoving receipts and screenshots into a pile as though burying the evidence would make it disappear. Her hands trembled so badly that the papers slipped through her fingers and scattered across the floor. Each page that fluttered to the ground whispered the truth. They had used Daniel. They had mocked him. They had destroyed him until he refused to let them anymore. Outside, Daniel walked to his car under the cold November sky. He could still hear faint shouting through the walls, but with every step away from the house, the voices grew smaller. He placed the folder in the passenger seat, turned the key in the ignition, and drove away. The road stretched out before him, dark and endless, but for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel trapped. He felt free, a weight lifted from his chest. The constant buzzing anxiety that had followed him, the one that whispered, What if they need me again? What if I don't give enough? What if they stop loving me? That voice was silent now. All he heard was the steady hum of the engine. All he felt was peace. The next morning, Daniel followed through. He went to his attorney and revoked every power of attorney form he'd once signed to help his parents. He called his bank and blocked any shared access. He changed his emergency contacts, removing his family's names and replacing them with 2 trusted friends. Every step was like shedding an old, heavy coat he'd been forced to wear. Every click of a pen, every signature, every phone call, it all brought him closer to a new life. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from his family. Daniel, you overreacted. We didn't mean it like that. You owe us a chance to explain. We're still family. He silenced the phone, deleted the messages, blocked the numbers, because he knew what they really meant. They didn't miss him. They missed the money. The weeks that followed were difficult, but not in the way Daniel expected. For the first time in years, he wasn't working overtime to fund someone else's crisis. His paycheck belonged to him. He moved to a new city, renting a small but bright apartment with big windows that let in the morning sun. He started therapy. At first, it felt strange to talk about himself, to say his own name and not follow it with a list of what he had done for others. But with each session, he began to untangle the years of manipulation, guilt, an obligation that had chained him. He reconnected with friends he'd drifted away from, friends who welcomed him back with open arms. They didn't ask him for money. They didn't guilt him for saying no. They just wanted him. Daniel learned to cook for one, to take quiet walks in the park, to sit in silence without fear. He was no longer surviving. He was living. But the past has a way of trying to claw its way back. Months later, Daniel's email filled with messages from his family. Desperate, pleading, manipulative. From Natalie, "You can't just abandon us. We need you. Joel's in trouble again." From his father, "You're ungrateful. After everything we gave you, this is how you repay us?" From his mother, "Please, Daniel, we're your family. Families stick together." But Daniel saw the truth. They weren't reaching out for love. They were reaching out for their ATM, and he refused to be that for them ever again. One evening, Daniel sat on his balcony with a cup of tea. The city lights glimmered below, 1,000 lives unfolding in every window. He thought about Thanksgiving, the table, the betrayal, the folder. And he realized something. For years, he had been terrified of losing his family. But the moment he finally let them go, he gained everything he had been missing: peace, freedom, self-respect. He whispered into the night, as though speaking to the ghosts of his past. "I only regret not cutting you off sooner." Daniel's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about courage. The courage to see the truth, even when it hurts. The courage to let go of people who claim to love you, but only want to use you. The courage to build a new life, even when it means starting from nothing. Because sometimes, family isn't who you're born with. It's who you choose. It's the people who show up when you're broken, who don't ask for more than you can give, who love you not for what's in your wallet, but for who you are. Daniel learned that the hard way, but he learned. And tonight, as you hear his story, maybe you're thinking of your own life, your own ties, your own burdens. If so, remember this. You don't have to be a cash cow. You don't have to be a punching bag. You don't have to stay at a table where you're not respected. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to rebuild. You have the right to finally live. This was Daniel's story, not of loss, but of liberation.